So let's take a look at the true stories and the figures used about alcohol and alcohol harm. And strangely enough, to do that, we're joined by someone we talked to last Friday about the budget for the New Zealand Initiative, Eric Crampton. Because Eric, I saw online, was getting into this story. And like everyone else, he's bitten at the headline. Costa's not calling for new measures. Costa's being niggled by Wowza Guyon. But let's talk about the figures that are generally used to estimate alcohol or health harms. Eric Crampton, lovely to have you with us again. How are you?
Doing well. Great to be back.
All right, you look sober as a judge as well, which is fantastic. Well, Eric, you have gone into bat before on the figures that are used to estimate harm in dollar terms. Are they good figures that we operate in the space with or not?
No, they're terrible figures, and more to the point, even if you had the right figure, it would be irrelevant. The only thing that really matters if you're thinking about alcohol harm is whether any proposed intervention is actually cost effective. You could imagine worlds where alcohol's harm were like 50% of GDP, but there was nothing that could possibly be done about it that was cost effective, and that'd be terrible, but policy wouldn't be effective. Or you could imagine a world where alcohol's social costs were really, really small, but there were a policy intervention that were really cost effective against those harms, even though they were small, and you should still do it, even though the aggregate social cost is tiny. So in one sense, the measure is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is cost effectiveness, and that doesn't depend on your measure of overall social harm. It depends on whether the measure reduces harm. What these numbers are good for is generating headlines like Guyon's that say, well, something must be done. Look at how big this problem is. No matter how irrelevant
where do we get the figure? Where do police get the figure saying that the estimated harm from alcohol is $7.8 billion a year? Because it's a lovely headline figure.
Yeah. Well, that's hard to say. I've got a pretty strong hunch, but unfortunately, Radio New Zealand chose not to put a link to the OIA documents that they'd gotten. And Guyon Espiner did not answer my email asking for the OIA, and he ignored anything on Twitter about it. So I don't know what the actual OIA documents are. Whenever I write a column drawn on OIA documents, I put a link up to them or screenshots of them so that people can check. I guess RNZ doesn't hold to that standard. But my guess is that this is from Burrell's number released in 2018, which was an update of their older number from 2009. So I can go through that a little bit.
Yep, let's do that.
The old number was nonsense. We'll go through the update of the number and then back to the old nonsense number. So the new number depends on two steps. It depends that the old number was right and that the method for updating it was right.
Okay, and we'll just remind people, this is the estimated financial cost of alcohol harm.
Well, that's how it's always been presented, but it's not quite that. It is the estimated social cost, which is not the cost to the government. It's not what you think it is, but we'll get through that.
Okay.
So the 2018 number is an update to the old number. So 7.8 billion is an update to the old $4.8 billion number that came out in 2009. Yeah. Now, the time when that came out, so Ganesh Nana, he was head of Burrell at the time before he got appointed to rec the Productivity Commission. Yeah. He was up at some alcohol conference announcing, here's our new number, and boy, is it big. At the time, it looked like it was just an inflation and population adjustment to their old figure. And I asked him about it, and he actually answered his email and said, well, no, we updated it by GDP growth. So what they'd done is you take GDP in the current year, so then it was like 2018, divide it by GDP from the base year. So Burrell's old numbers, I'm pretty sure, were from 2005-06. Take the ratio of the two, multiply that by the old cost, and there you go, you've got your new cost. Now that requires that alcohol social cost scales linearly with GDP. So whenever the economy booms, the cost of alcohol goes up. Whenever we have a recession, the cost of alcohol goes down. Now, that might be your model of the world. It isn't mine, but that's effectively what Burrell was assuming when they did that inflation and trumpeted it as this big new number that is an update of their old number. The only update was just updating by economic growth and assuming linearity in cost, which is nonsense.
I hate to be maybe cut to the... So this is all just Todd's really, this number and this dollar figure and It's not really related to, well, anything.
Well, that gets back into the construction of the thing. So if we go through the cost from the construction of it, now, would you expect when somebody is giving you, here's the cost to the country of alcohol, that they're including the amount that drinkers spend on their own booze?
Yeah, okay, I get you. Yeah. Well, look, I'm just reading again, thinking it in the context you've given me. 20 times the harm of meth. But then in the next paragraph, they say 1.8 billion social damage for illegal or harm from alcohol for illegal drugs. But there are a lot more illegal drugs besides meth, aren't there? So it really is a bit of a nonsense. All these figures that the whole interview with Costa is based on are kind of made up. Or they're not, they don't bear scrutiny, I think would be the term I'd use nicely.
Again, I don't know the numbers that they're relying on for the costs of meth. There was a Ministry of Health study that came out a few years ago trying to put figures on these, and the cost that they had on meth included police intervention costs, which, like, if you're trying to compare things saying, well, police put this much resource into X, but only this much into Y. Well, if the cost of police doing stuff is included in your social cost figure, well, can police ever do enough?
Yeah.
Because the social costs just go up whenever you add police into it, right? It's like the old numbers that they used to put on the costs of cannabis, where they would include the cost of running helicopters to pull cannabis out of the ground.
Yeah. Eric, I'm going to give you a slight counterfaction, and I'd be interested in your comments on this. Someone I know who is, well, let's say spends a lot of time around alcohol, it's their business, sent me this text called Fun Facts. 1.1% of New Zealanders use methamphetamine, right? 84% of New Zealanders over the age of 15 use alcohol regularly.
That's the other big problem with it, right? Prevalence.
Yeah.
So if you're
78 times as many people use alcohol as meth. So that comparison already gets a bit wacky. But alcohol...
And you also want to...
Yeah. Yep.
But you also want to be looking at the change in use over time. So when Burl did its original numbers, there was something like half a liter more pure alcohol per capita consumption than there was in 2018.
Yeah.
So aggregate consumption dropped, harmful consumption dropped, and yet they're just scaling it up by GDP growth.
Yeah. Okay. And this person goes on. Alcohol-related crime activity is 20 times that of meth crime. Okay. Do the meth, but if you do meth, you are 4 times more likely to offend on meth than you are on alcohol, right? Because of the proportions of people who use. And this person would claim that 99.99% of alcohol users never cause violence or commit serious crime that can be attributed to alcohol. And he says he doesn't have the percentage number, but he would wager that at least 50% of meth users commit serious or violent crimes, which in my experience of people, and I know people have been on meth, it does. I know lots of people that are on alcohol too, but it seems more manageable. He also points out that meth is the currency of gangs, not alcohol, and that he believes Costa is deflecting for and on behalf of meth only proves that he enables gangs, and then we get into the politics. But hey, it just would seem to me, and you study economics, Eric, you've got more names behind your letters behind your name than me. It's a completely bogus comparison, the meth-alcohol comparison, and you're telling me the figures in any case are all a bit wobbly.
Yeah, and it's also frustrating because if we're thinking, like when I started out, I was saying you should be focused on cost effectiveness. So you'd mentioned that Costa was kind of cornered into giving some examples of policies that he might...